I think it's just that slow degrade and students not wanting to go into the engineering field, and maybe this automation and manufacturing side isn't as sexy for them. They're off doing something else.
The Industrial Sage Executive Series, sharing the stories behind game-changing executives, their organizations, and insights into today's industry challenges.
Hello and welcome to today's Industrial Sage Executive Series interview. I am joined by the President and CEO of Lenco Integrated, Bob Kaniga. Bob, thank you so much for joining me today on the Executive Series.
Very welcome, Danny. I'm glad to be here.
All right, well, I'm glad to interview. We met, we were at the Assembly Show, we were talking about this before, in Chicago in 2021. My dates are all, all with all the COVID stuff. Time has just gotten all like messed up, right? But yeah, it was an Assembly Show in Chicago. I think we met you guys there. You guys have some pretty cool technology and solutions. I think you guys were showcasing a solution, I think, with a partnership you had with, I think, Stably at that point. And so it caught our interest, started talking, and here we are. So for those who aren't familiar with Lenco, can you just give me a quick high level who you guys are and what you do?
Sure, great. So Lenco, we make custom automated assembly and test machines, really for the assembly and the testing of small to medium parts. Been around over 35 years. We have over 8,000 machines stationed around the world. What we do is we work typically with an end customer who has a product and wants to get it to market, and wants to automate the assembly and or test processes. So we're doing the concept, we're doing the design, we're doing the build, and then the eventual validation and certification and test that the product is meeting form, fit, and function. We typically, because of the size of the products we handle and the expense of our solutions, we're focused in on a couple markets. So it's medical, it's consumer electronics, automotive, some commercial and industrial. So a lot of these specialty applications that can warrant the complexity and the cost of these automated systems.
Sure, absolutely. Okay, well, I'm sure that you guys have experienced quite like a lot of companies in this space, in the automation space, just quite a huge boom just relative to COVID. I know there was a lot of, the industries were moving towards a lot of automation anyways, but certainly, the basically gas got thrown on that fire.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. COVID, while it was an unfortunate thing for the world, it was a boost and a refocusing, I would say, to our business. We were fortunate early on to build a number of very rapid solutions for COVID test card kits, so the self home versions. Yeah. And that really shifted our market segmentation and where we're working on. But as a result of that, and as a result of supply chain disruptions and rebalancing, especially in this market in the Americas, you've got a lot of manufacturers who have decided they're not going to, go to a low-cost country and then have that disruption. So they're forced to build local to their customers. But then depending where you're at, probably now anywhere in the world, it's tough to get people and it's expensive to get people. So that whole shift, that was the gasoline that put on the whole industry. And in general, our end users have really lost this ability to do the integration themselves. So they're looking for us and our partners, our manufacturing partners, to put it together and give them the solution they want, in the end, which is produce their product to serve their customers.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. That's a story that we've seen and we've heard play out, constantly. And what's interesting too is as things shift. I mean, we're seeing all new trends and different things, and I don't know that. I think the labor piece was something that was really interesting. I think that everybody thought coming out of summer 2021. I know the big thing was, okay, well, the federal unemployment is helping to keep people out, and as soon as that's over, we're gonna be back to normal. And then all of a sudden, it was just like, wait a minute, people aren't coming back. Wait, what's going on? And it's a super interesting thing as we continue to progress, and it's like that story continues to evolve. So we'll circle back on some more of this stuff here in a minute. But what I want to do at this point is just kind of get to know a little bit more about you. We want to know about Bob. So Bob, tell me, how did you get into this industry? Like, take me way back. Like, did you study this? Did you go to school saying, hey, like, I'm going to go in engineering, or like,
Right.
what did that look like?
Well, like many people, I guess you take a bunch of turns. It's never a straight line.
Exactly.
I am a recovering engineer. I will admit
Okay.
that. But really, I first got into it because I wanted to be a pilot in the military.
Oh,
It was circa Top Gunish things, and for various reasons, I attempted going a couple times, and so the engineering was a bit of a fallback and a level of interest. So my degree is actually aeronautical engineering.
okay, that's very cool.
And so I ended up not going into the military, ended up going to work for Boeing. So I was designing and making airplanes, had a couple cool jobs there. But the aviation industry is a little bit cyclical. I was living in Seattle, probably more opportunities if I got laid off at Boeing if I was in Southern California. But in Seattle, there were some periods when Boeing laid off people and the lights were out in the city of Seattle. So I ended up joining an industrial distributor at the time who was selling PLCs and sensors and VFDs and data acquisition systems. Selling back, so I was selling back to Boeing to some of the departments I worked in. So that got me into the manufacturing side. I eventually went from a distributor to a manufacturer, and then spent a good part of my time on the manufacturer side, working for a number of public and private companies, domestic and international experience, things like that. So for the bulk of my career, I've been in and around this manufacturing space. And so it's kind of come full circle. As a manufacturer, I would sell to some of our customers. I would sell to people like Lanco, and now I'm in a position, to take a leadership role within Lanco and building that bridge between the manufacturers I once worked for and the customers I would occasionally service, and that bridge, and putting a whole solution from various manufacturers together to common customers and markets I've had experience with.
Oh, that's very cool. All right, so I have to ask you this follow-up question because you just completely piqued my interest on this. So, do you have your pilot's license?
I've got hours. I don't have it yet.
Okay.
That's a post-retirement thing for various reasons. Quite honestly, at my time at Boeing, I would sit up in the cockpit, and it's kind of boring being a commercial airline pilot. And the military route is gone. I mean, they're not recruiting as many pilots anymore, but it's almost more boring now because it's so automated than it is being a bus driver.
It's very true. So, all right. So I'm a pilot. I'm a general aviation pilot. So I have a small 1979 Grumman Tiger. But it's funny when you talk to, you hear some similar things about all the commercial pilots. And they're like, it's just, you literally, like, you take off, you just hit buttons, we're an autopilot, and we're just kind of monitoring things and talking to air traffic control. You get into general aviation, now you get to like do a lot more things, and and play around with it. It's kind of like a glorified bus driver, is what I was told.
Well, what I was always told, because I would occasionally go on delivery flights or revenue generating flights, and the pilots would say it's 99.5% of boredom and 0.5% sheer terror.
Yeah, it can be polar opposites, but one of the no in between. That totally makes sense. Well, that's good. I'm glad it's mainly boring. Than boring, and terrifying. So okay, well, cool. So sorry for that pivot. I just piqued my interest. I was very curious about that.
Sure.
Let's go. Kind of going back into your career and kind of how you kind of started and progressed and where you are now. Throughout that process, can you maybe share with me somebody or something that had just a really big impact in your career? Could, like I said, it could be an event, could be somebody, a mentor. And I know normally there's a lot, right? But if we could focus on one thing, what would that be for you?
I would say, so I had mentioned previously that my first job after Boeing was working for an industrial distributor. One of the vendors that we represented, I went and worked for them. And then we eventually got acquired by Danaher Corporation. We were their first acquisition that became a platform, which became their motion group. And so I was there in the nucleus of that. And, I've got a lot of respect for Danaher. They've got some spinoff businesses as a result of the success they had, which was the core Danaher businesses. But immediately when we got acquired, you got immersed in what they call DBS, Danaher Business Systems. And, they had their own kind of educational system, but it was a lot about Lean, Six Sigma thinking, some concepts of strategy deployment. And so it was about actually putting, a fact-based, process-oriented, results-driven type strategies together. So in terms of that was, eye-opening for me, and they've been wildly successful as a company. And I appreciate my time there. And I've taken that plus little pieces all around my career and used it as I've gone forward. And like anything, when you use it more, you get better at it. When you make some mistakes, you learn from that. But I would say that was, Danny, from a professional standpoint, a pivotal time in my career.
Okay, another follow-up question. That's great. You mentioned Lean Six Sigma. I'm curious, as we kind of pivot a little bit now into sort of current challenges and things that are going on right now. Obviously, one of the big learnings and things that companies and continue to see is this resiliency with supply chain and looking at just how fragmented things are right now. Relative to, let's say, lean manufacturing, this is an interesting question I like posing and asking people. Do you think we've gone too far in some cases with lean manufacturing? Relative to maybe just in time and some of these other elements?
I guess it's easy to sit in the moment or armchair quarterback. It certainly we're being impacted by it from the supply chain disruptions. And I think our customers are thinking about this differently now. So it's not all just in time anymore. The challenge is you can be very lean as an organization and efficient, but you're still reliant on outside forces. And unless you can get all of those people in the supply chain up and down to be as lean as and efficient as you, the chain breaks, and then you have a problem. And that really got exposed during COVID. Stuff was quarantined. You didn't have people. Stuff was stuck on the water. You couldn't get it out of ports and things like that. So, I don't know that's, lean has to be in the right balance, I think, and it has to be put in perspective with all the supply chain inputs and outflows that you have to deal with.
Yeah, sure. No, it totally makes sense. I mean, if you're looking at it in a vacuum, certainly, and hindsight is, well, I hate to say it's now 2020, whatever, overused phrase now. Right. But I just think it's interesting are companies rethinking that, I guess. I mean, you have to, obviously, because it's like, wow, but almost the unthinkable happened. But when we were, I believe we were talking a little bit before we started recording here, just how companies are now reshifting, say, hey, listen, we're reshoring, we're bringing stuff back. We need to make sure that our suppliers are closer to us, so we can reduce a lot of, instead of saying we're gonna have suppliers overseas because we've seen what's happening with shipping and ports in other countries, and there's a lot of dynamics at play that is there a Lean 2.0 emerging from this?
Yeah, I think it's the pendulum shifted, as you maybe previously implied, to super lean, super efficient. I don't think it's going to go back to massive amounts of inventory, but they're going to have contingency plans. They may make the same product, and we're seeing it with our customers. They're making the same product in multiple locations. In the off chance that a site has a cyber attack or a natural disaster happens, they've got some abilities to flex and shift how they run their businesses. But I think at the next wave, this notion of chasing the low-cost countries, there's very few places anymore that are left to do that. China, India, some of these places, or the BRIC countries that was kind of in vogue 10 years ago, they're all seeing labor increases. And then you add to the cost of transportation and logistics. where lean worked was, you had low cost inputs, you had a very stable logistics channel, and COVID kind of blew that all up, right? So now people are going back, maybe back to where they were 20, 25 years ago before they were chasing all this lean and high efficiencies. So, it's not going to go back to where it was. I think the pendulum will be somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, so no, it totally makes sense. What are some of these other principal challenges? Obviously, labor and supply chain obviously are the really big ones, but concretely, what are you seeing those some of these challenges are for your customers right now?
So their challenges. So I talked about how they provide us a product that we have to help them assemble and automate. Engineering is a discipline in demand for us and for them. And so sometimes we see designs coming from our customers that are not really made for manufacturability. And if they are, I guess that's good for us, but sometimes we lose projects because it's going to take so much automation to fit their product that then it becomes something that they can't tolerate any longer. So I think, on the one hand, it's good for us because they don't have the engineering talent, and sometimes they give us a lot of liberty and maybe bring us in early on in the design phase. So sometimes we're actually not only designing, automated equipment, but we're giving them comment on how these components put together make a product are going to be difficult for us to give them the solution they want. So we help them redesign some things. But in most places, the universities aren't producing enough engineers fast enough. And it's one thing to be academically astute and understand the ME side and the electrical side. It's another thing to put it into a practical sense. And that's a struggle our customers deal with. It's a struggle we deal with. One of our challenges, quite honestly, is because we're so intimate with our customers sometimes. We are an attractive talent pool for our end customers because they work with us for a year or 2 years on a machine. We go install, we live on site with them till it gets up and running, and then they put opportunities in front of some of our employees. But it's a challenge every business has in terms of keeping your employees engaged and wanting to work for us rather than somewhere else.
I definitely can see that being a very big challenge, certainly, especially in today's environment. So you were mentioning that one of these challenges that maybe a lot of your customers are losing some of this engineering talent they would have on staff. Is that something that was a result of of the pandemic? Was that something you were seeing beforehand, or is that new?
Yeah, I think it's just a slow degrade. Part of it is they don't have engineers. Part of it is their side is leaning and outsourcing it all. They used to have, in many cases, their own automation teams that at the very least serviced the equipment. At the very most, they actually designed it. But with few exceptions, Amazon is a company that comes to mind. They have their own robotics division. They do their own Skunk Works. They're taking some off-the-shelf products or designing stuff themselves. But I think it's just that slow degrade and students not wanting to go into the engineering field. And maybe this automation manufacturing side isn't as sexy for them. They're off doing something else, software related or somewhere else.
That's something that we hear a lot. You hit the key word. I think there are people, oh, it's not sexy. We want the jobs out in Silicon Valley or the tech startups and the cool,
Right.
I think personally, the reality of it is, I think a lot of people, there's a tremendous amount of innovation. Personally, I feel like there's so much innovation going on that's happening that it's really exciting. And it's even more an exciting time because of that, proliferation and acceleration of all these innovative new technologies. Certainly the pandemic, again, if you want a little bit of a silver lining, accelerated all this and pushed this to do new things. And what I think is fascinating when we look at you were talking about it, I can't remember now if we were talking about when we were recording before or after, but we're talking about certainly with the pandemic, so we have to focus on these automation initiatives because it's hard to find labor. If you can find it, and then we have the rising costs. And I think part of the big challenge is when you mentioned, maybe from a lean standpoint, companies going back 25 years from, where they were, kind of maybe bringing that pendulum a little bit more towards the middle, that because of these new automation solutions, and because of the labor that is not present or it's not there, that we can really bring in a little bit more independence and produce domestically. There's a whole sort of geopolitical, if we could look at that right now, energy obviously is a big point of conversation, and looking at, I guess this question of globalization, and it's natural you're seeing all that come back. And I think because of this technology, that's eliminating, it's solving the problem that 25 years ago companies started saying, well, we're going out because of cheaper labor. I mean, you're saying, well, now that's a problem they have over there now. So how can we do that here domestically? Well, I think technology and using automation, it's not going to be the end all be all, but it's certainly filling that gap is what I'm seeing and hearing.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's just not just to Western countries. I mean, we have operations I just got back from Malaysia. We have an operation in Malaysia, and that part of the world is booming to service that market, and we're thriving as a result of it. But they want to deal with a company that's global. Check, we are that, but they don't want to deal. We've serviced, most of our 8,000 units have been made in this facility in Portland, Maine, shipped domestically, shipped around the world, but that's going away rather quickly. It was interesting. I went to Kuala Lumpur right before I left Malaysia to a company I used to work for, Parker Hannifin, and we had sold them several machines. And their first question is how is your facility? Is it up and running? Is it functional? Do you have design, manufacturing, and supply chain capabilities in Penang? Because we know you, we've dealt with you around the world, but we want you to make our next machine here in country. So even in those areas where you'd say they're maybe not as developed, the mentality is buy local. Again, they want that interface directly with us. Teams meetings, Zoom calls are great, but they want to see face-to-face. They want to work collaboratively, and we need to be there, not in a couple days, but in a couple hours. So the only way for us to follow these global customers around the world is strategically put our businesses there where we have the capabilities locally to service and support them.
Interesting. No, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Totally makes sense. So for a focus for you guys, and obviously it sounds to be like that's on the roadmap for you. Start localizing a little bit where key customer accounts and whatnot.
Right.
Totally makes sense. So I'm curious, I'm going to move on to our magic wand question. I like this question because we get a lot of different answers on there. I'm going to give you a magic wand. It's this pen. I don't know. It's magic wand. You can solve any industry challenge that you see, but it can't be labor. It can't be supply chain. And I may even add a third one, and then we'll see. What would you solve?
There's still a war out there for different proprietary or open networks and in the connection of these devices. So, when I worked for global companies, we would push our one singular message, but no company, no matter your size in the automation world, has all the products. And so we're faced with this challenge of taking these disparate products from various manufacturers, all very good on their own, but the connection to one unified solution. And then the requirement moving forward as you get into Industry 4.0 to connect it up to the ERP level to get this full digitized solution is still in its infancy. So if we could get customers, suppliers kind of agreeing on some standard protocols, because that's where we get challenged in terms of the customer sometimes does not have a specification or a requirement for certain products. And then that makes our job a little bit easier. But sometimes they have other lines that our stuff has to hook into, or they've got some standards for maintenance reasons. And so we have this hodgepodge of different protocols and different programming environments, which makes it challenging for us. Thankfully, we've been doing this for 35 years, so we know how to hook this together. But quite honestly, it makes them challenging for them and expensive for them. So, I mean, that's the magic wand. I know coming from the manufacturing side for 25 plus years, they don't want to do it because they want to kind of keep you into their solution. We're getting there. You know, there are some open protocols and stuff, but I think going down that path, I think would speed up the automation, the digitization across the manufacturing platform, make it simpler, make it less expensive for everybody. But right now, everybody's still kind of in their camps and trying to, you know, purport why theirs is the best solution.
Yeah, it's great. I like interoperability. Seems to be a big, you know, a big thing. And so, you know, and it's interesting too with all a continued emergence of new technology that's coming in. Certainly, you take robotics for example. I mean, I don't know I don't have the updated stats on there, but just the explosion of new technology and robotics. You just even going to shows like we were at MODEX in Atlanta here a couple months ago, and you know, I think going back to like 2018, 2019. I mean, or not probably 2016 certainly, and then 2018 you continue to see more and more and more, and then now it's just like this massive explosion. But then everyone's running, like to your point, on their own protocols and so really tying in all of this stuff together.
Well, and speaking of robotics, and I'm sure you saw it at MODEX. So now there's these cottage companies that are growing up around that with a top kind of GUI layer that communicates to multiple robots so that the user has one interface to look at, and they translate everything down to the different protocols.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was actually Mass Robotics, the sort of the nonprofit in Massachusetts, or Mass Robotics. I mean, last summer they came out with an interoperability standard, which I thought was fantastic, and they had several different manufacturers involved with that to be able to do that. Do you think part of solving that challenge is that going to be really solved eventually through association and standards boards on coming in from programming and whatnot? I'm starting to get into areas that I am not as familiar with, but
yeah, I mean that's been, I think, the current path. I think quite honestly, it's going to be the end customer pushing that if you've got these kind of strict kind of hidden standards, we're not going to use it. So I think there's going to be multiple pressure points that are happening. I think manufacturers just have to come to a courage to say we shouldn't have a proprietary protocol, because it doesn't, in the end, if somebody comes out with a better mousetrap, and speaking of robotics, you've got these guys that are laying over the top of this, their power in terms of having a solution, but it's a proprietary solution, they start losing that power. So I think, like anything, it'll mature over time. So there'll be these open standards committees, which there have been for PLCs and other software platforms. But I also think there has to be some pressure from above, from the customer set, saying we will not use anything other than something that's open and standardized.
Well, that makes sense. That makes sense to me. So, well, Bob, listen, I've really enjoyed our conversation. It's been fantastic. We've covered a large swath of topics over relatively short time. But I appreciate just spending some time with me and our audience, just getting to know a little bit more about you, a little bit more about Elanco. For those who'd like to learn more about you guys, I've got LancoIntegrated.com. Is that correct URL there?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. We'll make sure those are in the show notes and anywhere this goes, so that if people want to learn more about you and your company, that's where they can go.
Well, great. Thank you for this opportunity, and hopefully we can speak again.
I would enjoy that. I'd like that as well. And thank you again. It was awesome. All right. Well, that wraps up today's Industrial Sage Executive Series interview. Listen, if you like that, make sure that you subscribe. If you are not already, you can go to, if you're not watching it on the website, you can go to industrialsage.com and subscribe there. And you don't want to miss out, because there's a lot of great content like this where you can learn more about trends and things that are happening, and learn about other executives, and have some great takeaways from there. So that's all I got for you today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be back next week with another episode on Industrial Sage.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode. Get notified every time there's a new episode by signing up for our email newsletters. You can also subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're there, please leave us a review so more industrial professionals can find us. Want us to tell your story? Go to industrialsage.com. This week's episode was produced by Rika Wiersma, filmed and edited by Optimum Productions, and our executive producer is Danny Gonzalez. Thank you for watching Industrial Sage.